I knew the moment I left my brother's name off the wedding guest list, my parents would lose their minds. What I didn't know was that they'd turn my wedding into a battlefield. My phone exploded with calls, voicemails, and messages accusing me of being cruel, selfish, and ungrateful. My mother cried about family unity. My father warned me that choices have consequences. And my brother, my parents' golden child, acted like I'd committed the ultimate betrayal. They said if I didn't invite him, they'd cut me off completely. No family. No support.
No inheritance.
Years ago, that threat would have destroyed me. This time, it barely slowed my breathing. Because I wasn't excluding my brother out of spite. I was protecting myself. And when my parents decided to ignore my boundary and showed up uninvited on my wedding day, smiling, dressed up, pretending everything was fine, they had no idea what was waiting for them.
Neither did I.
For most of my childhood, I learned one quiet, painful truth. Love in my family wasn't divided equally. It was assigned. My younger brother had always been special. That was the word my parents used. Special meant he could do no wrong. Special meant rules bent around him like they didn't apply. And special meant that, slowly, and without anyone ever saying it out loud, I became optional. Before he was born, I remember a different version of my parents. My mom used to sit on the edge of my bed and listen to me talk about school. My dad cheered at my recitals, even when I missed notes. I felt wanted. I felt chosen. Then my brother arrived and everything shifted. Suddenly, my needs were too much. My feelings were dramatic. My achievements were expected, never celebrated. When I was 10, I begged for a bicycle. I talked about it for months, cut pictures out of magazines, imagined riding it down our street with the wind in my hair. On my birthday, I opened box after box of clothes and books. My parents told me a bike was too expensive. 2 weeks later, they surprised my brother with a brand new bike.
No birthday.
No special occasion. He needs it more than you, my dad said casually. You're fine. That phrase followed me everywhere. You're fine. When I made honor roll, my mom nodded without looking up from her phone. When my brother passed a single test, we went out to dinner. When I stayed quiet, I was mature. When he screamed, he was expressing himself. I tried everything to earn back the attention I'd lost. I worked harder in school. I helped around the house. I told myself that if I was good enough, patient enough, understanding enough, they'd notice. They never did. Instead, my brother grew louder, more entitled, more certain that the world, and I, existed to serve him. And my parents let it happen. By the time I was a teenager, I wasn't just invisible. I was expected to sacrifice for harmony, for family, for him. And every time I swallowed my anger to keep the peace, a part of me quietly learned something else. One day, I would have to choose myself. By the time we were teenagers, my parents' favoritism stopped being subtle and started becoming destructive. I got my first part-time job when I was 16, working evenings at a small bookstore. I remember clutching my first paycheck in the car, staring at the number, feeling proud in a way I never had before. It wasn't just money, it was proof that I could earn something on my own. That pride lasted less than a week. My brother complained that it wasn't fair that I had spending money and he didn't. Instead of telling him to wait his turn, my parents called a family meeting. My mom folded her arms and said, "You live under our roof. What you earn should help the family." Then my dad delivered the real blow. "You'll give your brother half of your paycheck every month," he said. "That's final." I laughed at first, thinking it was a joke. It wasn't. When I protested, they threatened to make me quit my job. So I agreed because at 16, I didn't have the power to say no. Every month, I handed over half my hard-earned money while my brother spent it on video games, snacks, and things I couldn't even afford for myself. That was the moment something shifted in him. He stopped asking. He started taking. He wore my clothes without permission, borrowed my electronics and returned them broken, took my car the moment I got my license and laughed when I panicked about being late. And every single time I complained, my parents turned it back on me. "Stop being selfish. He's your brother." Family shares. They never once told him to respect my boundaries. I tried to endure it. I told myself it was temporary, that once I went to college, things would get better. I worked harder, stayed quieter, learned how to disappear without fully leaving. Then came the camera. I had been saving for months for a professional camera for my photography class. Photography was the one thing that felt like mine, something that helped me breathe. When I came home for winter break and opened my savings box, a thick bundle of cash was gone. I already knew who had taken it. My brother didn't even deny it. He shrugged and said, "You can save up again." When I demanded my money back, my parents didn't yell at him. They didn't punish him. My mom just sighed and said, "You really should have hidden it better." That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, realizing something terrifying and freeing at the same time. No one in that house was ever going to protect me. If I wanted safety, respect, or peace, I was going to have to create it myself. After the incident with the camera, something inside me finally shut down. I didn't scream. I didn't argue. I didn't even cry in front of them. I just stopped expecting anything: apologies, fairness, love. And once I let go of that hope, leaving became inevitable. I took on extra shifts at work, applied for every scholarship I could find, and chose a college far enough away that dropping by wasn't an option. When I moved out, my parents framed it as rebellion. "You think you're better than us now," my dad said. I didn't correct him. I was too tired. College was hard, but it was also the first time I felt free. No one took my things. No one minimized my feelings. If I succeeded, it was mine. If I failed, I learned and moved on, without being compared to anyone else. I stayed on campus during holidays, claiming I was busy with work or classes. The truth was simpler. Going home hurt more than being alone. After graduation, I landed a job in marketing. It wasn't glamorous, but it was stable. It paid my bills. It proved I could stand on my own without my family's help. That's where I met Daniel. He wasn't loud or flashy. He was steady. The kind of man who listened without interrupting, who believed me the first time I talked about my childhood instead of asking what I might have done to deserve it. When I met his family, I kept waiting for the moment things would turn cold or conditional. It never came. They asked about my day. They remembered details. They didn't keep score. For the first time in my life, love didn't feel like something I had to earn. When Daniel proposed during a quiet weekend away, I said yes, without hesitation. Not because I believed marriage would fix everything, but because I finally felt safe enough to build something real. Then the reality hit me. Weddings come with guest lists. Guest lists come with families. And the family I had spent years escaping was about to demand a front-row seat in the life I had built without them. That's when I realized my hardest decision wasn't going to be about flowers or venues. It was going to be about boundaries and whether I was finally brave enough to keep them. I didn't make the decision lightly. For weeks, I stared at our guest list, hovering over my parents' names, my brother's name, adding them, deleting them, adding them back again. Every time I imagined them at the wedding, my chest tightened. I pictured my mother criticizing my choices, my father sulking, my brother soaking up attention like it was his right. This was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. Why did the thought of them being there fill me with dread instead of joy? That's when the answer became painfully clear. I wasn't obligated to invite people who had spent years hurting me just because we shared blood. So I made the call. When my mother phoned to ask why invitations hadn't arrived yet, I took a deep breath and told her the truth. I said that given our history, I didn't feel comfortable having them at the wedding. I said I wanted a peaceful day, surrounded by people who genuinely supported me. The silence on the other end was sharp. Then she started crying. "How can you do this to us?" she sobbed. "After everything we've done for you?" My father took the phone next, his voice cold and controlled. "You're being incredibly selfish," he said. "You're tearing this family apart." I tried to explain. I really did. I brought up the years of favoritism, the money, the boundaries they never respected. He cut me off. "That's all in the past," he snapped. "You're exaggerating." Then my brother entered the conversation. Uninvited, as usual. "You're seriously not inviting me?" he said, incredulous. I already told people I was going to be your best man. I actually laughed. We barely speak, I said. Why would you be my best man? That's when my father delivered the threat they'd used my entire life. If you go through with this, he said, don't expect anything from us. You're cutting yourself out of this family. No support.
No inheritance.
Nothing. For a moment, my hands trembled. Years ago, that threat would have worked. It would have sent me scrambling to apologize, to compromise, to sacrifice myself just to keep the peace.
But something in me had changed.
I understand, I said quietly. That's your choice. My brother exploded after that. My phone lit up with messages, angry, cruel, accusing me of being jealous, bitter, heartless. He called me ungrateful, said I was trying to make myself feel important by excluding him. I didn't reply, because for the first time, I saw it clearly. This wasn't about my wedding. It was about control. About the moment I stopped playing my role, the quiet, accommodating daughter who made life easier for everyone else. By saying no, I wasn't punishing them. I was taking my power back. And that was something my parents and my golden child brother had never learned how to handle. A week after the phone calls and the threats, I thought the worst was over. I was wrong. Daniel watched me pace our apartment one night, rereading messages I hadn't responded to, my jaw clenched so tight it ached. After a long silence, he said gently, "Do you want closure, or do you want peace?" I didn't know the answer. He suggested one last meeting. Neutral ground.
No shouting. No surprises.
Just honesty. Against my better judgment, I agreed. We met at a quiet cafe in a neighboring town, far enough that none of us would run into someone we knew. Daniel came with me, sitting close enough that I could feel his presence without him taking over. My parents were already there. My mother's eyes were red and swollen. My father wore the same tight expression he always did when things weren't going his way. My brother arrived last. He sat down without looking at me. My mom started crying almost immediately. "How did we get here?" she asked, gripping her coffee cup like it might shatter. "We're family. Families don't do this to each other." My dad jumped in before I could respond. "You've always been dramatic," he said. "This wedding thing? It's gone too far." I stayed quiet. I let them talk. Years of therapy had taught me something important. People reveal themselves when you stop interrupting. When they finally paused, I spoke.
Slowly. Clearly.
I talked about my childhood.
About the bike.
The paychecks. The camera. I talked about being dismissed every time I was hurt and punished every time I spoke up. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't insult them. I just told the truth. My mother shook her head. "That's not how it happened," she said weakly. Before I could respond, my brother laughed. "Oh, come on," he said. "You've always thought you were better than us." Something inside me snapped, but not the way it used to. "Is that why you took my money?" I asked. "Why you broke my things? Why you felt entitled to everything I earned?" For the first time, he looked uncomfortable. Then suddenly he shrugged. "Fine," he said. "I did it on purpose." The table went silent. "I hated that you were leaving," he continued, his voice sharper now. "College, jobs, you were always moving forward. Everyone acted like you were so impressive. I just wanted to knock you down a bit." My mother gasped. My father stared at him like he was seeing him for the first time. "That's not what you told us," my mom whispered. My brother rolled his eyes. "It's not a big deal. It was years ago." That was it. That was the moment every doubt I'd ever had disappeared. "You just proved my point," I said quietly. "None of you think my pain matters." My dad leaned forward, suddenly urgent. "Okay," he said. "Let's reset. We'll pay for the entire wedding. Venue, catering, everything. Just include us." I almost laughed. "You're still trying to buy your way in," I said. "This isn't about money. It's about respect, and you've never had any for me." My brother slammed his hand on the table. "You're going to regret this," he snapped. "You think cutting us off makes you strong? You're nothing without this family." Daniel stood up. "We're done," he said calmly. This conversation is over. As we walked away, my mother grabbed my arm. Does this mean you're cutting us out forever? She cried. I gently pulled my arm back. I don't know, I said honestly. But I know I need distance. And for once, I'm choosing myself. We left the cafe, without looking back. Outside, my hands were shaking, not from fear, but from clarity. They hadn't changed. They hadn't grown. And no matter how much it hurt, I finally understood something that set me free. If I invited them to my wedding, they wouldn't come to celebrate me. They would come to remind me of who they thought I was. And I wasn't that person anymore. I thought walking away from that cafe would end it. Instead, it marked the moment my family realized something terrifying to them. I wasn't coming back. The first few days were quiet, almost eerily so. Then the pressure started, subtle at first, then relentless. My phone began buzzing nonstop. Aunts, uncles, cousins I barely spoke to were suddenly very concerned. They asked what was really going on, why I was being so hard on my parents, why I couldn't just be the bigger person. The story my family was telling wasn't the truth. According to them, I was unstable, overwhelmed, having some kind of breakdown. They said I was pushing everyone away and needed help. Hearing my own pain rewritten like that made my stomach twist. Daniel found me sitting on the couch one evening, staring at my phone with tears in my eyes. Without saying a word, he took it from my hands and turned it face down. You don't have to explain yourself to people who don't want to understand, he said. He was right. So I stopped responding. That's when my mother crossed a line I never thought she would. I was at work, sitting in a meeting, when my manager pulled me aside and said there was a distraught woman in the lobby asking for me by name. My heart sank before I even saw her. It was my mother. She was crying loudly, clutching her purse, telling anyone who would listen that she just wanted to see her daughter. When she spotted me, she rushed forward. I already bought a dress, she sobbed. How can you do this to me? I need to see my baby walk down the aisle. I felt my face burn with embarrassment and anger. This is not okay, I said firmly. You need to leave. She clung to me harder, pulling out old photo albums from her bag like evidence of a past that no longer existed. I had to threaten to call security before she finally let go. After that, I blocked their numbers. All of them. It felt drastic.
Cruel even.
But for the first time in my life, my chest felt lighter. We didn't take any chances after that. We password protected every wedding vendor. We hired security for the venue. We gave photos and names and clear instructions. Part of me hated that it had come to this. Another part of me felt safe. In the middle of all this chaos, something unexpected happened. Daniel's parents invited me over for dinner. At one point, his mom pulled me aside, took my hands in hers, and said softly, I just want you to know, we're proud of you. Standing up for yourself isn't easy. I had to step away to cry. Because in that moment, I understood the difference between family that demands loyalty and family that offers love. As the wedding drew closer, I still felt waves of guilt. There were nights I lay awake imagining my father walking me down the aisle, my mother smiling in the front row. Then I remembered the cafe, the manipulation, the threats, and I reminded myself why I'd drawn this line. They weren't losing control because I was cruel. They were losing control because I was finally free. And they weren't done trying to take that freedom back. The morning of my wedding arrived calm and bright, almost deceptively so. As my makeup artist worked, I stared at my reflection and tried to stay present. Daniel had texted me from the other side of the venue. I can't wait to see you. I smiled, breathing through the nerves, telling myself that today was about us.
About joy.
About finally stepping into a life I had chosen. For a while, it worked. Then one of my bridesmaids knocked on the door, her face pale. They're here, she whispered. My stomach dropped. Who? I asked, even though I already knew. Your parents. And your brother. For a split second, everything inside me froze. Years of conditioning screamed at me to panic, to fix it, to run out and smooth things over. I stood up too fast, my heart pounding in my ears. Where are they?
I asked.
At the entrance, she said, arguing with security. I walked to the window and looked down toward the gate. There they were. My mother in a formal dress, clutching her purse like a shield. My father standing rigid, jaw clenched. And my brother, smirking, hands in his pockets, like he owned the place. They looked confident.
Certain.
As if this was just another moment where pushing hard enough would get them what they wanted. I felt a familiar surge of fear. Then something new rose up and swallowed a whole.
Clarity.
I straightened my dress and turned to my bridesmaid. I'm not going out there, I said calmly. I hired security for a reason. Minutes stretched on. From the window, I watched my father gesturing angrily, his voice clearly raised. My mother wiped at her eyes dramatically, shaking her head as if she were the one being wronged. My brother leaned in, saying something sharp that made the guard stiffen. Then the guard shook his head.
No.
I felt my breath steady. My father stepped closer, pointing toward the building. My mother tried to step past the gate. Another guard moved in front of her. Still no. My brother's smirk vanished. He shouted something, loud enough that I could almost imagine the words without hearing them. His face reddened, anger flashing across it in a way I'd seen too many times before. And then it happened. Security escorted them back. Not dramatically. Not cruelly. Just firmly. I watched as my parents protested, as my brother twisted around, scanning the venue like he expected me to appear and fold. When they finally realized I wasn't coming out, something shifted. Confusion. Then disbelief. And finally shock. They weren't being heard. They weren't being accommodated. They weren't being centered. For the first time in my life, they were powerless. A strange calm washed over me. My hands stopped shaking. I turned away from the window and caught my reflection again. I didn't look like the scared girl who learned to stay quiet to survive. I looked like a bride. The music started soon after. When the doors opened and I walked down the aisle, every doubt vanished. Daniel's face softened when he saw me, his eyes shining in a way that made my chest ache. In the best way. Nothing else mattered. Not the gate. Not the shouting. Not the family that had tried to break me. We said our vows with our hands intertwined, voices steady. We promised each other honesty, protection, partnership. There wasn't a single distraction.
No whispers.
No drama. Just love. At the reception, laughter filled the room. Glasses clinked. Someone pulled me onto the dance floor, and I laughed harder than I had in years. Daniel's sister gave a speech about choosing family, and when she looked at me and called me her sister, tears streamed down my face. Later that night, as the music slowed and the lights dimmed, Daniel pulled me close and whispered, "You did it." I nodded, resting my forehead against his. Not because I got married, but because, for the first time, I didn't let anyone ruin something that belonged to me. They came expecting control. They left with nothing but the shock of realizing they'd lost it forever. When the wedding ended and the last guests drifted away, I expected to feel something dramatic, triumph, anger, maybe even grief. What I felt instead was quiet. The kind of quiet that settles in after a storm has passed. In the weeks that followed, messages trickled in from extended family. Some were awkward but kind. Others carried a soft disappointment, carefully wrapped in phrases like, "We just wish things had been different." I listened, thanked them, and didn't explain myself. For once, I didn't feel the need to justify my boundaries. My brother sent an email a few days later. Not a text. Not a demand. An email. He apologized for trying to force his way into the wedding, for the things he'd done growing up, for never taking responsibility before. He said being turned away by security had made him realize how serious I was. He mentioned therapy. I hoped he meant it. I didn't rush to respond. When I finally did, I wished him well and told him I needed distance. Not as punishment, but as protection. Old versions of me would have taken his words as a promise. This version simply accepted them as information. My parents stayed silent. Through relatives, I heard they were heartbroken. For a moment, guilt surfaced, familiar and sharp. Then I remembered how many times my heart had broken quietly, without anyone rushing to fix it. Daniel and I left for our honeymoon shortly after. Sitting on a beach thousands of miles away, watching the sun dip into the water, I realized something simple and profound. I wasn't running for my family anymore. I was running toward a life built on respect. I used to believe family meant endurance, putting up with pain because you were supposed to. Now I know better. Family is where you are safe to be whole. And when I closed my eyes that night, wrapped in the arms of the man I chose, I felt something I'd never truly felt before.
Peace.
Not because everything was perfect, but because I finally stopped letting people who hurt me stand at the center of my life. That chapter closed the moment the doors of my wedding did. And for the first time, the future felt entirely mine.